Okay, so let's get on to video number 2. Now we're going to be discussing some components that look or have similar origins to pu. So first we are going to talk about dai, which means bad, evil, vicious. It is not a word on its own, and it is found in words that are related to death, funeral, or damage. All right, let's get into the history. So it's going to be a little morbid for a second, but bear with me here. So originally this was supposed to depict bones from a carcass, and the original meaning was remnants of bones. So I believe that's referring to the meat off of the bones, to be a bit vulgar. So yes, beautiful images continuing. We have a skeleton here, and then on the right, the arrows pointing to the oracle bone script of this component, what it originally looked like. And then here is the whole evolution. So there are a few different instances of this component as an oracle script. And then we see it in the seal script in 2 different ways. And then, of course, how we see it now. So it is a little difficult to see the oracle script here as that skeletal, but I guess it's just a very rough drawing. Let's go back to, yeah, I'm not quite sure how they went from A to B, but they did. So that is the history of how we got to this component. And as you can see, the fonts, if you look at where it says history of, and then the bottom right regular script, they are a little different, that stroke on the inside, and that is just because of the font choices. So that is also something to keep in mind for a small stroke like that. Okay, so our functional breakdown, we're just going to do one for each of these for time reasons. So I think we all know this character, sul, which means to die or death. And so the meaning component here, death, this is actually another meaning component. And this was surprising to me. I spoke with Gao Laoshe about this one, and it means person, which I did not know at first. I was very confused. I thought it was a sound component. So this one was a little tricky. And just for some context here, B means compare. And this is actually 2 people next to each other. I think it's the inverse of the Ren character. So I believe, I just thought that was very interesting. So I wanted to include that. And then here are a few other words with si. So we have da si, which is to kill or beat to death, and sha si, which is to kill. So let's move on to something a little more pleasant now. So the component zhi, which is to support, sustain, raise, and it can be a word on its own, like zhi fu, which is to pay. So we can see it on its own, and as a meaning component, it is words related to talent. But keep in mind, I'm saying meaning component, and hold on to that when we get into that in the functional breakdown. All right, so let's get into history real quick. This is pretty similar to the depiction of pu. This is a person holding up a stick of bamboo. I know this is not bamboo here, but this was the best picture I could find on stock images. So let's look at the evolution really quick. Yeah, so they did not have the oracle bone script from what I could see. Maybe it was out there and I just didn't see it, but I think the seal script is the earliest that they have of this component. So you can see that does, I would say that pretty much, yeah, that looks like a hand, and you can kind of see the stick there. It's a little bit more clear to me than the oracle bone script was of the pu character. I do see it a little bit more clearly, and I do think it's been a little more consistent throughout every iteration. All right, so our functional breakdown. The word human limb. So if you remember what I was saying about meaning component on the other slide, it is actually most often a sound component. And the meaning component here is ro, which is meat. And I have this screenshot in the bottom right-hand corner from, I don't remember, the website was called Dong Chinese, or I think that was it. And this is where I got a lot of this information. And this is where I was able to confirm what I had been looking up on my own when I was doing my own research on dictionaries and everything like that, that this is most usually a sound component. So I thought that was very interesting. But these two do have this component and pu do have very similar origins. So that brings us to our summary. So you might be able to remember the one we just looked at, but I'm going to give you all a moment to see if you remember which one is which, and then I'll do a little grand reveal. So I'll just give you a moment. Okay, let's do the grand reveal. So this one on the top, the Oracle script, this is pu. So if you remember, it means to tap, to rap on something, and it gives meaning related to hand movements in characters like bang, gai. Okay. Sorry, my computer froze there for a second. All right, so continuing on, the next one. Okay, yes, this one was dai, bad, evil, vicious, words related to death, funeral, or damage. And then we have zhi, which is support, sustain, or raise. And this is most often a sound component. So these ones are either similar in look, or in the case of pu and zhi, they have a very similar origin. Obviously, they don't share too much in meaning, but in looks, it's good to be aware, especially because, as you saw with dai and the evolution picture of the character, that depending on fonts, they can be pretty similar. So just something to keep in mind. And also, as I've said a couple times now, zhi is most often a sound component. So even though this was a lesson mostly on meaning components, I just wanted to include that because it's a good reminder. And that is it. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to your responses on formative.